Today's show, we're going to be talking about basic income, everything basic income. But here's the big question. How do we pay for basic income? Hmm. Do we use monopoly money? Oh, probably not. I mean, money's there. All the programs and services are there. Just tied into one, or maybe not. Guess we'll find out from our guest who's going to be talking about how do we pay for basic income. Stay tuned, everyone. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to PWD Allies podcast. My name is Brent Frayne. I'm the host, and today I have a programming announcement at the top of the show. As you're probably all aware, if you're following the channel, we do these shows on a regular basis, usually Mondays and Fridays. Sometimes we'll squeak in the odd show in between, but on a consistent basis. Now, of course, summer has now arrived. It's nice and sunny out. Hopefully some days are better than other days. But Brent's going to be taking a little bit of staycation time off. I'm going to be off after today's show. I'm off until the 21st of July. But stay tuned on any of the Breaking with Brent segments, coffee time, stay travel segments. Traveling with Brent and Sonia on our little travel vacation moments, but they're going to be locally. In between that time, I will be making a trip over to see Neil, which I'm looking forward to. And, here's a good program before we start the show. Save on Foods. They have a great program where you keep saving up your points and you can actually go and get points and redeem them for BC Ferries travel pass.
Oh, they do that now. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
We
cool.
So we actually we've done that before, and so we've redeemed some points, and we're going to give you those tickets. So yeah, it's extra bonus. So
Well, I got a couple of announcements too, Brent, just before
yeah,
we start, and I apologize to Susan, but I'll be very quick. First thing is we have Brianna. She's a loyal follower of our podcast. She's done a membership now. She's done the Timbit membership of the $2 a month. So I just wanted to call her out and say thank you to that.
thanks, Priya.
Because I said that I would call out everybody that does sign up for membership. So thank you to Brianna for that. The second thing is, today is the July 4 for our American friends south of the border. So I just wanted to wear my American T-shirt, my Marvel Captain America. So there you go.
Right on. Yeah. And, happy Independence Day to our U.S. Friends down south. Hope you enjoy your day today, and I hope you're tuned in live. I hope you enjoyed today's show. It's all about basic income. But please subscribe, like, and share, and comment on today's episode, and stay up to date on your local podcast too, wherever you find it best suited for you. With that being said, I'd like to introduce our guest today, Susan Abells. Susan Abells. I knew I was going to mess that one up.
We even practiced it before the show, Brent.
I did. I practiced. Practice makes perfect. But hello, Susan. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me on your show. I'm really pleased to be here.
Yeah,
Nice to meet you both.
It's awesome, especially talking about a topic that's really close to me about basic income. And so I like to share that sentiment with you of talking about all basic income and how do we pay for basic income, Susan? I guess that's the big question of the day.
It's a really big question, but the good news is that we've been working pretty hard on this for a number of years. And we have a province in Canada, Prince Edward Island, who has been working on that very question really since 2013.
Wow.
They have been working on a political consensus, which they now have, that amongst all parties in the legislature, that they support a basic income guarantee. They had a poverty reduction, all-party committee, which recommended a basic income guarantee, and which was passed like in 2020. So the most important thing on how to pay for it is that you have broad consensus support, political support to pay for it. Because really, government can choose to pay for what it wants to pay for. It just has to have the political will to pay for it.
Yeah.
And so, that has been an ongoing process in PEI, which has been unusual. The other good news is other provinces are cottoning on to this idea that, unless you have the political will to start it, like let's for example go to Ontario. The Liberal Party in Ontario decided one day, woke up and said, yes, we are going to implement a basic income pilot. And they picked 3 communities, and they went and they asked Senator Hugh Segal, who's been involved in that. He was one of the founding leaders of the basic income movement in Canada. And please design one up. They designed one up and implemented it for a year. And that's as long as it lasted. It was supposed to go for 3 years. However, a political election comes along in Ontario. Although Premier Ford said he would never cancel that pilot, he immediately did so. And so, what is so important that advocates for a basic income understand is one, it is affordable and we can pay for it if there's political will to pay for it.
Yeah.
And really, what is the jurisdictions who should be paying for it? And it's a combination of the federal and provincial governments. So, following the vote on the all-party support for a basic income guarantee, an organization that I work with nationally is called Coalition Canada Basic Income Revenu de Base. And it was really formed back in 2019 to begin supporting Canada-wide the PEI effort, which was so far advanced, just locally in their communities and in the province towards supporting a basic income. And so 2 of our members, Barb Borax and Tony Pickard, coordinated and led the development of a broad, like 20-member committee to start looking at the number 1 recommendation from the PEI government, which was a proposal for a guaranteed basic income in PEI. And this broad coalition of people included 6 nationally recognized economists, politicians, both at the provincial level, who were current politicians because they were all in support of basic income, and retired federal politicians who were more free to speak because they were retired.
Yeah.
And so that included like Wayne Easter, who is, somebody with a long, long history in the Liberal Party, Conservative Party, and NDP Party. And so there was, again, broad representation with people who really understood federal politics because they were federal politicians. And then we had PEI civil servants and bureaucrats who are working in that field, who understand, they have access to their local data that they could share with us about, so that the economists could model different ideas. And federally, we had a retired senior level bureaucrat who actually was an associate deputy minister under Duclos, Minister Duclos, when he was the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, and he literally rolled out the Canada Child Benefit. So this guy actually knows,
Right.
what does government need to hear? Like,
Yeah.
what are the questions? And was really strict and say, we have to answer these questions. So there's a question of cost, but there's also a question of benefits. There's a question of risk and what's the impact on the labor market. And all of these things. So how do you administer it? How do you pay for it? And what might be the benefits or the impacts on things like labor? And so they answered over a 2-year period this question. And they came up with some real important innovations, which gets directly to the cost. Traditionally, when we've had a basic income, there's 3 types of family units that the tax system looks at. There's the nuclear family, which is a single person, a couple, or a couple and their children. And that's a very narrow definition, but that's a nuclear family in economic terms, a definition of a nuclear family. Then there's the census family, which looks at a household and how many adults live in the household who are related. So if you're roommates, this doesn't apply to you. But if you're like mom and dad and adult children who are still living at home, their incomes would be considered. And this really lowers the cost. When you start going just from a nuclear family, think about it, if they had an adult child or 2 adult children living in that household, there would be 3 basic incomes in that household. Whereas when they look at the household of how much money does this family bring to the family unit who are working or not working or whatever, but they consider all the adults who are related. And that's called the census family. And then there's one further definition, which is called the economic family, which broadens it out. You still have to be related, but what if your parents, like seniors, are living there? Like your, let's say mom and dad are in their 20s, and there's, their parents and grandparents.
Yeah, which happens a lot, actually, because...
And there's a lot. It's like the extended family, but they're all related, right?
Okay.
So this does not apply to, I live with 6 roommates because I can't afford rent.
Right.
That is 6 individual.
Yeah.
Roommates are not included.
Okay.
So there's 6 individual basic incomes going into that household because they're not related, right? They're not a family.
Yeah, and that money goes right back into the community and helps. It blossoms all small businesses and
absolutely,
and people can make the great decisions that is good for them.
Exactly.
I find it really interesting that like say the politicians that are currently in power, whoever it may be. But once they're out of power for, like you mentioned, for a good period of time, and now they can talk about. But they can't. But they don't want to talk about it, or they can't talk about it while they're in.
They can't talk about it. If they're the power, if they're in power, particularly, they really have. It's like caucus discipline. They really have to maintain their discipline and the party line. That's the nature of our parliamentary system. But what I wanted to say is, from a cost perspective, when they modeled how much would it cost to do a basic income model using the census family, the cost was reduced by 40%.
Okay.
Whoa.
Right?
No.
Now, the really interesting thing is, after this came out, the Parliamentary Budget Office looked at this model. They also modeled what would be the impact on the labor market. Very low. And it has proven low by many different modeling agencies, including the PBO, that it's about 1.4 to 1.6%, which means an hour a week that somebody would work less. So the impact on the labor market in the Parliamentary Budget's Office own language is not very significant. So that's very important for politicians to hear, because they always say, oh, if you get a basic income, you won't work.
Yeah.
There is nothing to indicate that is true.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because it actually gives people opportunity to try something new.
Yeah,
And it doesn't work, okay, well, they can try something else, but they've
people will
got
take
that base
flyers.
floor.
People will take flyers on certain opportunities.
Yeah, but they've got that base floor that they can now, that they don't have to worry that if this job doesn't work out, well, now I don't have income. Now you have that income. Now I'll get to maybe we'll talk about BC in a little bit.
Well, yeah, I wanted to go there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
Sure.
so you must have known. But before we
I was
go
reading your-
before we go to BC, I also just wanted to call back to what you said. You mentioned the child tax benefit too, because you know, like you kind of alluded to, there's an opposition there. It's like, well, this is going to cost too much money. Like, who really needs a basic income? Well, that's what the child tax benefit is, right? And
Exactly.
You know, that's exactly what it is, and
That's
so
exactly what it is.
And there's no opposition to that.
It's like the GST. It's like the GST tax credit, right? Same.
Yeah. So
Right. And they say, well, it's going to cause inflation. Well, there's no inflation when seniors get a basic income. They get old age security and the guaranteed basic income supplement, or
GIS.
guaranteed income supplement. There's no inflation there. That doesn't cause it. That money is just spent in the local community. You know, it's not like you're creating money to pay for this. You're not doing that. There's no inflation from the Canada Child Benefit, and yet it raised, according to the Liberal government at the time, 300,000 children out of poverty. So the question is, you know, what is the most cost-effective way to raise people out of poverty? But here's another thing about the PEI and basic income. In the welfare system, if you go to work and you earn money, your benefit is clawed back dollar for dollar.
yeah,
That's a disincentive to work.
Yeah.
Why would I work if I can't earn more than a very low paying job or a part-time job, because that's all the energy I've got. And I can work 2 or 3 days a week, but that's all I can do. And then lose my benefits, but not really get ahead. Whereas a basic income says, no, you can go to work and it will be clawed back at 50 cents, half of that, so that it's always worthwhile for you to go to work and earn that extra 50%. So you get 50% of your benefit and the money you earn.
Right.
You know what I call the clawback in BC here, Susan?
But
The PWD clawback. I call it the pink unicorn. The pink unicorn. Because I've been a victim of the clawback for 12 years. I've had my first wife. I've had the survivor's pension or survivor's benefit clawed back. And for the first 2 years, it was every single cent. For the first 2 years, it was every single cent, and then the government said, well, we're going to honor the orphans portion, so like my son gets his portion, but they still claw back almost $500 from me. So it's been every month for the last 12 years they've been doing this, right? And so that's what I call it the pink unicorn, because they just make stuff up. They just make stuff up to allow them to claw it back, right?
To justify for it.
But let's now turn our attention to the BC attempt at basic income, Brent, because they really did not do a good job of that, right?
Yeah, I found it very interesting because, Susan, you had mentioned about Ontario that was going to be studying the basic income at the time. Now, at the same time, BC, at the time, we were having our election. We had just had our election, and we had the BC NDP along with the BC Green Party at the time, and they had launched a basic income. They were looking into the basic income pilot, and it was interesting at the timing because Doug Ford, when he came in, of course he scrapped it, as we know, and it's really unfortunate because it was actually you were right. I mean, there was communities. There was like three communities, I think, in Ontario that it was
And there was
actually,
nothing wrong with the model. The model was
yeah,
fine.
it was
Everything about
brilliant.
it was fine. I mean, it was, the nuclear model, nuclear family model. So it was 40% more expensive than a census family model.
Yeah, because
But
it was like changing,
nevertheless,
yeah, it was changing people's lives though.
it
It was
was
really,
changing people's lives.
oh,
It wasn't the full province. They could have, learned from it, tweaked it,
mhm,
which is why the people in PEI and that group said, we want a demonstration project for 5 to 7 years.
yeah,
Because first of all, in getting back to your question about paying for it,
mhm,
the number one thing is that it has to be a provincial and federal partnership
yeah,
to pay for it because it is costly to get 10% of the population. Because if you look at it and say, well, what does it cost to deliver all these services and supports and services? And I said, well, that actual modeling of what is the best way to reduce poverty
mhm,
from 10% of the population to about 2% of the population has actually never been done. So you want to model this over time and have an administration that has been built together, the feds and the province together, to address the issues of the rollout of the basic income
mhm,
and tweak it to make sure that it is the most effective and efficient way to deliver poverty reduction. And secondly, to understand that money alone is not a silver bullet. You
mhm,
cannot have a basic income without robust, publicly funded services like health, social services, education and training services,
mhm,
and the other services that support people in order to really fundamentally change the nature of the society into one that supports everyone,
mhm.
right?
Absolutely, because I mean, I'm glad you mentioned about healthcare. I mean, like huge. Like, I mean, you give basic income, and then we put less strain on our healthcare system, which now betters a
Absolutely.
person's well-being in so many ways, and then they can
So
build
many
from
ways.
there.
Um, Income is the number one social determinant of health. It
Mhm,
determines if you're eating well, if you take your medication and have access to your medication, if you have access to your medical supplies, if you have all of these things. Income is fundamental to health and well-being.
mhm,
But imagine if everybody on a basic income was assigned a family doctor and a social worker to make sure that you were getting access to every benefit you are entitled to,
mhm,
and that you have a family doctor to help guide you to better health.
mhm,
And that to me is a society that from the foundation up supports its people. From the foundations up. And you cannot do that. Here, have some money, see you later. That's not what we are
no,
advocating for.
Yeah.
We are
yeah,
advocating for robust public services,
yeah,
which support but robust public services, and people would argue to what degree is robust. Like right now, in terms of mental health, we have a lot, an addiction, we have a lot of problems in just providing the basic services. And it's the same in healthcare. We're short. We need robust, publicly funded services because it's a combination of funding and income and supports that give people every opportunity to live their best lives.
mhm.
You,
And that's why in BC, I was really shocked that they scrapped the program, the pilot project, because they looked and they saw Ontario got rid of it. Like, well, I guess it's not working. I guess we better get rid of it in BC. And it was very unfortunate because I think that it could have been very successful
well,
program.
yeah,
Well,
but
let me tell you a bit
Yeah,
about BC.
sure. Yeah,
yeah, I'm sure you
yeah,
know. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll
yeah.
tell you a bit about BC. It was disappointing on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
They were nowhere close to actually doing a pilot, but they were interested, which is, you're absolutely correct. They were interested, and they were looking for a panel of experts who would provide them with the information they needed to make their decision. Now,
we should say it was three. It was three total, right?
Three total. And they were all economists.
Yeah.
It's unlike the PEI projects, which were economists and politicians and civil servants and advocates, all in the room, making those decisions. That was critical. The advocates were also there, talking about what, because there's two things when you create policy. There's how much does something cost, and what are the values underlying it?
Interesting.
What are the outcomes that you want? Who do you want to serve? How do you want to serve them? And those aren't economic choices. Those are political choices. And advocates have a lot to do with, reminding our politicians of what the values are in the community.
Oh, yes.
So they were there. Here you had three economists. And, when they say, well, we're politicians, we didn't know who these three economists were. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
They were hand selected, right? They were
hand selected by the government to write a report. And then you have to ask yourself, well, when that happens, when government selects the writers of the report, they get the report they want.
Yeah.
And that is extremely disappointing. And then you had three economists who decided that instead of acting like economists and providing economic, like modeling what it would cost, and then saying, well, we're not going to recommend it because it's more cost effective to incrementally support the existing system. They didn't model that either. What they did is they created a political social framework, which described the values that indicated that there has to be reciprocity. And basically, if you guys wanted to be philosophers, then you should have had philosophy degrees or political science degrees. But no, you were three economists. And did you do your job as three economists? No, you created a political science, political economy, social framework around what the values should be. Now, those should not be developed. I mean, you can, in the PEI project, they said, we're not going to make value decisions. We're going to do the modeling for you. We're going to have the discussions with politicians and bureaucrats about how do we do this, but we're not going to say what the values are. And very distinctly, what this group of three economists did was describe the values underlying a basic income.
So they basically attach stigma already to it, right?
Yeah, they attached their values to it. They didn't consult. But I mean, they would claim they did, but I mean that is a liberal, basic liberal framework, in classical liberal framework in economic terms. Well, there's other frameworks that you could have developed, but you didn't have that input. You didn't have input. I mean, they would claim that, well, we consulted with, but not in the same way of having those people in the room suggesting and having those discussions in the room. They didn't have 20 people. They had three. They were all economists, and none of them particularly supported basic income and principle.
Well, that's what I was gonna get to, Susan. Is you've kind of alluded to the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Well, but I know as well, and you just said it, that two of the three economists didn't even support basic income. Only one did. So, of course, if you have two against and only one for, what's your self-fulfilling prophecy going to be for the success of the project,
right? Of course, it's going to fail then, right? Because, we tried. I mean,
I mean, and I looked at, I watched very carefully as David Green was the chair of that. He's the head of the economics department at UBC. These people were all very qualified economists, but they
Mhm.
were economists. And when he was presenting, he said, no, 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 his expertise is also in the labor markets. And he confirmed to the senators in that meeting that he was in that no, no, it doesn't have an impact on the labor market, but we believe that we can do a better job of it if we incrementally increase supports that to very, very targeted populations
Mhm.
and address the issues of those highly targeted populations. Now, we have an entire social safety net that is highly targeted to particular groups of people. And what's the poverty rate in Canada? It's about 9.7%, right?
Oh,
So, yeah, across Canada, it's about that.
yeah.
So, like, just rounding it up, it's about 10%.
Mhm.
Okay, but if you actually give them, I mean, there's evidence that when you gave the seniors money, now I'm not saying it's not falling short now because there's two things, and we can talk about the disability tax credit,
Mhm.
about access and sufficiency.
Mhm.
Those are two key principles of a basic income. And I will tell you that in today's society with the affordability crisis,
Yeah.
seniors are falling behind. People with disabilities are falling deeper and deeper and deeper into poverty as if they're not in deep enough poverty already.
Mhm.
It's becoming incredibly, almost impossible to rent, impossible to feed yourself. I mean, I go to A&W to feed a family of two, and
Yeah.
it's $24 for two burgers and one combo, not two
Yeah.
combos,
Yeah.
one
What?
combo and
Yeah.
two burgers.
It's made of gold or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like at A&W, that used to be
Yeah.
fast food. It's
Yeah.
$24. So
Yeah.
just imagine the struggle. Now, in that meeting, David Green was asked by one of the senators, says, well, he said it doesn't influence um, the labor market, and you have this social framework, which is based on a classical liberal political framework.
Mhm.
Is there any conditions under which you would recommend a basic income? And his answer to the Senate committee was no. In which case, what you're telling me, Professor Green, is that you are ideologically driven, not evidence driven.
Mhm.
So I was shocked and dismayed
Yeah.
by that comment. And every time as an advocate, I would speak to my BC MLAs.
Mhm.
I got the same question. No, we looked into it. We answered the question. They didn't recommend a basic income. End of conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That report has been hanging around now for 5 years.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the only good news about it is it's old news.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
You just get some dust in it, it'll dust off
Yeah,
the
you
paper.
can dust
like,
that off now
Yeah.
because it is not really an evidence-based analysis of is basic income the right policy. It is hanging on a framework of ideology
Yeah.
that does not, by nature, support a basic income. And so there was, you know, you can go and hire, and to the NDP government's credit, they identified different groups that needed support. And one of the good things that came out of that support, that report, was a program for youth aging out of care, which is quite a holistic, but again, their income is around $1,027 a month.
Mm.
And what a basic income calls for is 85 in PEI, it's 85% of the poverty line as defined by the market basket measure.
Oh, well.
Okay. So like a, you know, I think that the range, if I can look at it, was just a minute here, I can tell you. Um, well, anyways, it's around $2,000 a month. It ranges. It's about 1,800, which was
It's about CERB level, right?
Yeah.
about CERB level.
Yeah.
But CERB is a hard comparison because you're actually paying people to stay at home.
Yeah.
But if you're going to pay people to stay at home, then they need about $2,000. Like it confirmed what sufficiency was.
Yeah, the most minimum, yeah.
Yeah, and if you have a couple, it's around 20, like two working adults, like together, whether with children or without, is about
You talk-
2,700.
You talked about the government doing reports and studies, and I think that's so important because I mean I've mentioned a few times on the pod, more than a few times that one of the jobs I had for about 6 years is I worked for the Sam Sullivan Disability Foundation in Vancouver, and I was basically a cheerleader. I was hired as a cheerleader to interface with other people with disabilities and help them, like, meet one-on-one, help them to just, if they've never been tied or done any work experience before or any kind of job before, I was there to kind of get them plugged in,
Right.
and
Right.
at least get started on exploring different job opportunities, right? And so this whole program lasted for about 6 years, and it was really successful. It was really because it was led by advocates like me that were disabled ourselves. So you had people with disabilities helping people with disabilities, right? So
Yeah.
it really was effective. But I just want to say that the one thing that was kind of annoying about the whole thing is that we had very elaborate reports. Like, all of us would send in very elaborate reports every month, and like I was very clear on putting in my reports, like this is what's working and this isn't what's working. I was almost like doing little case studies every month. I would do little case studies of this is what's working and this isn't what's working, right? And also too, I should mention we had two people from the was it health science department or the psychology department. So like two people from UBC that were tied to the program as well, and they were also doing their own reporting. And so you had all these reports after 6 years of this, like, monthly reporting, and it seemed to me that the government, for the feedback that I was getting, is that the BC government here only wanted to hear about all the success stories, and as soon as you said something critical like this is not working, they're like, well, don't tell us that, just tell us the success stories.
Yeah, you don't want to make it.
And I think that happens a lot, actually, that government likes to do all these studies, and if they don't like the results of the studies, they'll throw that out.
They'll throw it to the shredder.
Let's do another study until we get the result we want. Like you were just saying about the basic income, right? Like, we'll only do the basic income thing if we get the result we want.
Yeah.
Right?
That's our job. That's true to a degree, but it's also our job as advocates to continually advocate for what we want, and not allow them to really, get away with just, what I call in government happy talk.
Yeah.
No, it's not just happy talk. There's a lot of problems that we need to address. So let's talk about the good news, but let's also talk about the bad news. And it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting, and I totally respect that. The good news is that the basic income idea and requires us to, work with other communities. Like, for example, this is for age group 18 to 64. This is the working age adult. A large percentage of the people living in poverty have disabilities. Some can work, some cannot work. It's important for us to be able to open lines of communication with the disability community to say, well, here is what we have been able to do. What are your thoughts on this? Is there something that we need to be aware of? Now, we do that with the disability community. We do that with unions. We learn from the people, from the sectors. What is their view of it? What are their concerns about it? And I know, for example, there is real fear, and rightfully so, that, well, if you increase the amount of money people get, the services will decrease.
Mm.
And there is always that concern. And it is a legitimate concern because in some people's mind, you get a basic income and, off you go, flourish or not, it's up to you. But that's not what we're advocating for. And I said that really clearly before. And unions are very concerned about that too. They said, look, we have worked for decades and decades and decades for the incremental improvements in working conditions that we have received, and public services are critical to this. And we say, absolutely. They are critical to this. We want to hear from the disability community. What are your concerns? What is it? Is there anything that, because one of the things that would probably be replaced would be, for example, welfare. But a principle of basic, that's an income, like money would replace money, but not services. So the question is it being replaced with something that is better and more sufficient and more accessible to you with who have disabilities? We want to hear your thoughts on that. Instead of getting like $1,000, if you got $1,700 or $1,800, is that better? But then the question is, it's not just, you don't just get welfare. Maybe or you don't get just disability.
Yeah.
But what else do you get that you're worried about losing? Like, for example, the GST tax credit. Like, there's lots of tax credits that might be removed, but that's a negotiation.
Yeah.
Right? That's a negotiation that happens between the province and the feds. And there's no point in going 15% below the poverty line and taking away benefits for people who can't work, period. For whatever reason, they cannot go, they are unable and do not have the capacity to go to work.
Well, and there's the registered
I ask you that question.
Yeah, there's the registered disability savings plan too. I don't know if you're aware of that, but the problem with that one is that you have to actually have money. You actually have to have money first to put in to save it, right?
Exactly.
I just wanted to get to a question in chat though. Like if we're going to be talking, if we're going to spitball a case study situation here, like let's say, for example, that we're gonna put out a targeted basic income that's basically targeted only for people with disabilities. We have a question from Melvin in chat. He says, would the basic income be garnished? At what level or under what conditions would a basic income be garnished?
Like clawed back.
Clawed back or garnished, yeah.
Garnished. Okay, just so I was clear. It would be 50% for every dollar earned, not 100% of every dollar earned, so that it would always be worthwhile for somebody to work an hour, right? So they would get their wage, and only 50% of that wage would be clawed back from their benefit. So they'd always earn 50% of their wage.
Okay, so it would never fall below that.
No.
Yeah, okay.
No. And if you don't work and there's no requirement to work, you would get 100% of your benefit. But if you can work 2 or 3 hours a week or whatever it is that you have the capacity to work, like, let's say if you earned $20 an hour, then $10 would be clawed back from your benefit, but you would be $10 further ahead.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That makes.
So, because there's no point in earning $20 an hour and having $20 an hour removed from your benefit.
Yeah.
Right.
Then you're not further ahead.
Yeah.
And if you cannot work enough hours or get a high enough paying job that you can replace your benefit and get further ahead, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That's a complete disincentive to work.
Mhm. I think one of the other issues too that I'm hearing in the community in Victoria, just around my area, is because I've talked about basic income to a few people that I know, and one of the concerns is, I mean, it's a great thing, that number one, but one of the fears that I think people that are having that I'm hearing is they will lose their medical coverage, like their medical, like prescription glasses or dental or other prescriptions that they would normally qualify for under the disability program. And so I think that's one of the fears, that is that stigma of, well, if I go and do this, I'm going to lose this, or if I maintain this one status quo of gainfully up there, well, I'm going to lose my my whole program, because now they're going to say I'm self-sustainable. So I think that's part of the one of the dilemmas that people are running against too. It's
Right.
clawbacks, right?
And that is a big concern. And they have, that is a legitimate big concern. Now, there's two ways that we look at this. First of all, if you have the province and the federal government working together, like, compare this to the very sad, pathetic rollout of the Canada Disability Benefit.
Oh,
which is
yes.
completely underwhelming. Not only that they decided that really we'll give you $200 a month or $2,400, which doesn't even lift people out of deep poverty.
Yeah.
So there's a sufficiency problem, but they didn't even weren't in the room with the provinces, or didn't set it up that it would not be clawed back.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to wait and find out what the province is going to do. The benefit of the PEI model is that the feds and the province are in the room together. This is a partnership, and the feds don't know what all the benefits are. Is there a risk? Could they say, yes, but they can afford that now? But they also know that with the cost of living right now, and what they are really achieving, number one, is bringing people out of deep poverty. That is the first step. And then you want to be able, for those who can go that last 15% and get themselves out of poverty, that's great. But the cost of living is so high that the level that they have to earn to get out of poverty is higher and higher and higher.
Exactly.
So you take away glasses, like, you take away supports and services, which to me, your medical benefits are supports and services. They can look at other things like a GST credit or this, that, and the other, where they're looking at tax credits where certain amount of money replaces certain amount of money. But you don't want to turn it into what they call a zero-sum game, like everybody loses game.
Yeah.
No, you give people every opportunity to continue to raise themselves above poverty, so you retain your tax credits, your supports and services. This is what basic income advocates advocate for. We advocate. Can we promise that? No, because governments do. One thing is to have an all-party support for Canada Disability in the House of Commons, and then to roll out something that is so disappointing that it causes dismay and embarrassment for the government across Canada, which it did.
Yeah.
So there's a risk to them to take away things they should not be taking away. And the advocacy doesn't end. We have to make sure that people get all of everything that they're entitled to, and there's a lot that they are entitled to. They have to be registered with the CRA because the tax is paid through the federal government. But we advocate maintaining the administrative infrastructure that everybody, oh, well, then we could get rid of the welfare office and this and that. Yeah, well, what if you lose your job in the middle of the year, or you're in a wildfire and you lose your house and your livelihood and your benefits run out and you have to wait a year to file your taxes before you get any support?
Yeah.
That doesn't work. You have to have the provincial infrastructure and people there helping you access everything that is available provincially, and then you have to have the infrastructure to help you, get on the CRA tax rolls and make sure that it's not a barrier to you, so that you get everything that is available to you from the federal government, and you make that system work seamlessly.
Well, that's when originally the CDB was supposed to be all inclusive, historic. It was supposed to go. With the agreements that were sitting in the committee under the Senate, there was measures put in place where it was going to go automatically to everybody that's on provincial and federal benefits anywhere in Canada, where
Only makes sense.
because CRA already has all that data. Like, they know who gets what already. And so it automatically can get administered. And always excuses was, well, we don't know what the provinces pay. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do.
The words that were used initially were transformative, life-changing, right? Remember that?
Yeah. And $200 a month is not life-changing.
Yeah.
And secondly, limiting it to a very specific, the Canada Disability Tax Credit.
Yeah.
Hard. Why should you have to go through that when you already went through it all with the province?
Yeah.
The province is closer to you. They deliver. You can go to their office. You can talk to them in person. You can do all this. And the CRA sitting there in Ottawa going, no, that doesn't work.
Yeah. Because I had discussions with CRA about this, and they're just baffled. They're like, that makes no sense. Why are the feds doing that? I go, I don't know. Why don't you ask them?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But their hands are tied because they have to follow with what protocol is put in, and they're just like, it's crazy.
And just remember that when decisions like that are made by politicians in the House of Commons or whatever, in a party, those are the value decisions, the values that determine how well a policy works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if those values are misguided and misdirected, and they're ignoring what the Senate says, they're ignoring what the advocate says, they're ignoring everything that, and then do something. There is a political cost to that.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
I always say the term accidentally on purpose.
Well,
Accidentally on purpose.
But here's something ironic is, get the provinces are saying, well, we're not going to claw back the up to $200 benefit. Well, no, you're not going to claw it back because most people are not going to qualify for it. So, we're not going to claw it back, but you're not going to get it. So, but we don't want to raise.
But aren't you generous?
But I'll use BC as an example. They put it in their platform for the election when we had our election. They were going to run with the CDB because people with disabilities are going to get the CDB. But don't worry, we're not going to claw that off you. But most people are not going to get the CDB. But we're not going to raise the rates because we're waiting on that. It's like a scapegoat of an excuse of why not to raise the rates.
But I love
to give people the income.
But I love it too that they're basically taking credit for a federal program. And saying, look at us. So we're not going to claw this federal program back.
Aren't we great?
Aren't we great that we're not going to do this?
Well, it is great, but that's the thing.
It is great, but it's just...
It is great that they're not going to claw it back.
Yeah.
But it's not their jurisdiction. And so they're being generous to the people who do get it. And there's a few people who will qualify to get it. But, and that's why it is so important to have a partnership delivering this, because our social safety net And our social services and health services are complicated. And the feds know nothing about it. They send a check over to the provinces. That's provincial jurisdiction. And imagine if they are working towards the benefit of the recipients who get the care,
Yeah.
who get the support. And, you know, that in an ideal world, you know, and then there are people who are not paying their fair share of taxes.
Yeah.
We're not saying, you know, like silly phrases like eat the rich. We're not saying that. We are saying fair taxation. That's all.
Yeah.
And if everybody paid their fair share, there would be a lot of money available to support literally the 10% of people who need it, but the long-term gain is savings in the healthcare system, savings in the justice system, saving in, do you know what it costs to keep a person in jail for a year? $200,000 a year. You talk about the highest rent district in all of Canada is an 8 by 10 cell. Prison cell.
Wow.
That's how much it go, and they have two people living in a cell. That's $400,000 a year to keep them in that cell. And a lot of those people are there for poverty reasons,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
Not everyone. I'm not saying
Back in, yeah.
there are huge savings to our society, but saving through wellness and saving through clawbacks are two different things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, that's almost like a really good mic drop moment, and we're actually at the end of the show. So I think that's a good
It was a great
place
discussion. We
to
learned a
wrap
lot
up, yeah.
from both of you. Thank you very much.
That was a fabulous discussion. I really enjoyed our discussion today on that. And I'd love to extend the offer to have you back, and we can explore, you know, like more of these discussions on where basic income evolves going forward.
Exactly. I'd love to. And so I'll just leave with one last thought. If we in BC can advocate to our MPs and say, could you do two things? Reconsider your support for basic income, to get an all-party committee together and start the political consensus, because it's not a left-right issue. It is a value of our society, and we share them broadly, these values. And third, support the implementation of the PEI project, because that's how national, federal policy is made. Healthcare started in Saskatchewan, $10 a day started in Quebec, and then everybody looks around and go, oh, that's a good idea. And they follow through. So those three things, please support basic income. And if you have questions, please go to basicincomebc.ca or Coalition Canada Poverty Basic Income.
Okay, I'll have both the links at the bottom.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, I understand that that you know Tom Pogson.
I do very well.
Yeah, and Tom had really had said a lot about.
You came highly recommended, so we have you on.
And Tom talks a lot about basic income. He just put a video out yesterday, and he mentioned about GST. I mean, wow. I mean, GST. Wow. I mean, that's a source of basic income right there.
Right there.
Yeah.
It's a contributor for sure. And then the question is, do we claw that back, or do we move people toward a wellness model?
Yeah. But here's another quick question before we end the show, though. I was just going to mention, okay, we know, I mean, it's a controversial thing, but it was that carbon tax, right? Carbon tax credit. Now, that was a source of kind of like a basic income, because it actually helped improve people's lives. Yes, they are still paying, even though they took that away now, federally and provincially, people are still seeing that cost of living is still the same. Like, so that money really makes sense. And all they could have done was take it away, fine. I understand that, politically that's what they want to do. But really, all they did was zero it down. They didn't really take it away. They just zeroed it down, but they could have shifted that credit over to somewhere else to help people on low income to replace it. And they never did
Take it
that.
away, but give it
They
to you
never
and me,
did
Brent.
that.
Give it
Yeah.
to you and me.
Yep. And there you go. It's just like,
Yep.
it was never a carbon tax. It was like, yes, we paid for our gas,
Yep.
and then we got a rebate.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
didn't, it wasn't a tax, it was a rebate.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, wow. I mean,
Bad marketing.
yeah.
Should never have called it a tax.
Yeah. I want to thank you so much, Susan, for coming on today. And I want to also thank my listeners and the viewers for tuning in. I really hope you enjoyed today's content. And as always, subscribe, like, share, and comment. Buy us a copy, and down in the section there where you can contribute to the channel if you find it very valuable source of entertainment for yourself or just educational, or you want to be a part of the show. Email Neil or myself, and we'll get you tuned in and scheduled in later in the summer. Because Brent's taking some personal vacay time locally, like I mentioned at the top of the show. So there won't be any show until July 21st at the earliest. That will be the first available spot.
But go back and watch our back catalog of all the other podcasts.
Yeah,
so
there's lots to catch
we can
up
keep
on.
our hours up for the.
And then I'll be back for a while, and then later in August I'll be just taking a little bit more. So I'm just kind of breaking up the segment a bit. So later in August I'll be doing approximately around the same 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. So that way, also Neil can also have some time too for himself. And
I deserve a break as well, Brent.
Life is never break, because I look at it as advocacy. My advocacy, even though I won't be on the show for a little bit, my advocacy within my community is still going to be very, very strong on social media. Also, if I see something that stands out, if people want to talk about basic income to me, or I reach out in the community and I do a one-on-one discussion, I will be posting that out. There'll be so many things going on, but I want everyone to enjoy the summer. Susan, enjoy your summer too.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and just everyone enjoy the sunshine. Don't get sunburned like I did. I got a little bit of sunburn in the back on Canada Day. And I tell you, I wasn't out there that long. The wind was blowing, so I got sunburned. It's just
windburn.
And it hurts.
I was just like, wait a minute. Whoa, hang on. Hey, this cold thing, this ice cube, it really feels good on my neck. It's melting. But thank you everyone for tuning in. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay.